Ford just had their Q3 2025 earnings call. There was a lot of course, financial information in the whole presentation. We listened to the whole thing, pulled out all of the EV related news, including their Gen 1 plus their future EV plans. We're going to talk about it right now, so let's go. Hi, I'm Patrick. Half of the electric duo lives on the other side of this wall during her day job. But before we get started, I also want to remind you guys, if you are a Ford EV owner or a Ford enthusiast, make sure you check out FordEVClubs.org. We're building an online community there for all Ford EV enthusiasts to share information, connect with each other, find events. We have some events coming up this weekend. It's a great place. Go check it out right now if you haven't already joined. The other thing I want to mention before we dive into all of this, of course, the Q3 earnings call was mostly, about financial earnings and profits and what's going to happen. This is not a financial analysis. We don't have any stock in any auto manufacturer. We stay out of that realm so that we aren't, presenting you with information and trying to pump a stock or dump a stock. So this is just literally about some of the news that was mentioned in there about EVs. And we started doing this with some of them, in the past based off of the little tidbits that we heard. And in fact, after the Q2 earnings call, we jumped on because there was the exciting tidbit that Ford was going to have their Model T moment back in August. So I thought that was very exciting news. We ended up going out to Louisville for the Model T announcement by Ford. So if you're interested in all the details on that, go check out that video. But we're going to cover what was just said in this one. And we will give you a little bit of the financial stuff because that, of course, affects what's going on in the EV world. Overall, Ford is still projecting a profit of like 6 to 6.5 billion for the year. I think that's the numbers. See, I don't get into all the financial stuff. Their big headwinds for this year have been the tariffs affecting a lot of what's going on. Plus now they have one of their big aluminum plants that's essential for making the F-150 had a fire. So that's a big headwind for them. It's the Novellis plant. That's affecting F-150 Lightning production. There's a lot of talk about how they're addressing that and trying to get that plant up and running and find other sources. The reason that we do need to talk about that, it is affecting F-150 Lightning production, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But they also talked about the financials of the Model E division. If you're not familiar with Model E, Ford is basically the only company that's sort of doing it this way, but they have broken up the company into Ford Pro, which is their fleet and business side of things, Ford Blue, which is the traditional Ford that we all sort of think about, Mustangs, Bronco, all of those basically consumer-facing gas and hybrid cars. And then there's also Model E, which is their fully electric line, which is, the E-Transit, the Lightning, and the Mach-E. Plus over in Europe, it also includes Puma, Capri, and the electric Ford Explorer that's over there. So they're take all of their electric and put it under one division so that it's very easy to see the profit and loss directly on, for their electric lineup. Not a lot of other legacy manufacturers are doing anything similar to this. It's sort of like they report their sales and earnings by region. Ford is breaking this out so that we can actually see. And that's where a lot of the headlines have come from in the past few years after every single earnings report, because their EV division is losing quite a bit of money. And so far this year, they reported that they've lost about $3.6 billion. And a lot of us are always like, yes, they're losing money, but a lot of that is an investment toward the future. But they specifically said this year, a big portion, I think they said actually $3 billion of that $3.6 billion of losses so far for Model E this year are because of their Gen 1 product line. And what that means is all of the pricing pressures that they're having to reduce the cost of the Mach-E and the Lightning, having plants over in Europe, the Capri and Explorer aren't selling quite as well as they hoped. So they have these factories that basically the way that they end up making a profit is producing at volume. Well, they're not producing at volume. Sales are a bit lower. There is a bright spot. The Puma is doing very well over in Europe, particularly in the UK, where they have some new incentives or credits over there that the Puma qualifies for. And from what I understand, there's a lot of demand based off of reports from websites over there. The Mach-E and Lightning, of course, had a fantastic third quarter here in the US because everybody knew that the federal tax credits are going away. So people were trying to beat the deadline. So pretty much every EV in the US had its best quarter in Q3. I do have to note that Ford is also continuing some very good leasing incentives and financing incentives on the Mach-E and the Lightning. There was some talk that they were going to like pre-purchase the Mach-E and Lightning, the Lightnings that they had in their inventory, and then sort of like do some paperwork shuffling so that when you leased it from them, it would still qualify for the tax credits. They have abandoned that plan. I think they had some political pressure saying like you're sort of, finding a loophole and people won't think favorably about that. Who knows what went on behind the scenes, but Ford is not going to do that. GM was going to do a similar thing. They're also not doing it. But Ford is still continuing their incentives and deals on the Mach-E and the Lightning. I just checked yesterday. I think it's like over $6,500, and you add in some other incentives, and it's like $8,000 that you can get off of a Mustang Mach-E for leasing, as well as some great financing deals. And they still have the free home charger install, like not just a charger, but the charger and the installation for a standard installation. It's called Ford. It's part of Ford Power Promise. So if you are watching this and you're sort of like, I want to find out about a Ford EV future, but I'm also thinking about one, go check it out. There's some great deals on them right now. Ford also talked about sort of, the general economic conditions globally, the influence of Chinese cars. And we of course focus on Chinese EVs that are starting to flood Europe and other markets, including Mexico. But they, basically overall, there's a lot of, manufacturing coming out of China that is affecting the overall global market. And of course, famously, I guess, Jim Farley was driving a Xiaomi SU7 for 6 months and talked about how great that car was and how Ford needs to compete with that. So again, they're, referencing the Chinese manufacturers coming to the US at some point, maybe, unless tariffs sort of put up a roadblock for them. So they also, and this was something very early on in the call, Ford basically cited the Trump administration for doing tariffs that are helping Ford out because they are like the most American company out of all the big, big three. So there's a little bit about that where they're sort of playing into the current political climate, thanking Trump for the tariffs, but also they mentioned several times about the rollback of some of the EPA regulations and requirements, that's going to help them out. And specifically, again, this isn't necessarily EV related, but they were talking about like the Broncos and the Raptors and things like that, Mustangs that are like gas guzzlers, and they would normally have to like sell enough Mach-E's and Lightnings to like offset that or be forced to buy credits from another company. That's sort of being pushed back. That is being pushed back. So now they're like, they actually said they had artificially limited the demand for some of those type of vehicles because they didn't want to, all of a sudden have these penalties being assessed on them, that now they're not going to have those restrictions. So they cited that as a real positive mark. As an EV enthusiast, like I understand they got to make money, but it's very disappointing to hear their excitement over that. So it's sort of unfortunate, but it's sort of the environment that we're here in the US. So a little bit disappointing on that. Jim Farley also has said a couple of times recently, and it was reiterated in the call, up until this point in 2025, we've had about 10% of car sales and truck sales have been EV, and he's estimating that that's going to be cut in half, that in Q4 beyond we'll probably be hitting about 5%. So that's a really huge step back for the US EV market, and very, very unfortunate. So that was, some more bad news. There was a lot of mixed and bad news if you're an EV enthusiast. Before addressing the future of their EV lineup, they did talk again about the Gen 1 is dragging on their bottom line and that there's not much that they can do. Like if they could sell a bunch more, that would be great. If they could raise prices, that would be great, but then that would affect demand. So they've been doing a fantastic job of reducing the cost of manufacturing, but there's only so much that they can do. So like with the Mustang Mach-E, it's going down in price in 2026. I haven't seen the full price list, but I know that the Select is going down, I think a couple of $100. The GT is going down by almost $1,000 in price. So they're still working on those price reductions. On the Lightning side of things, they are getting rid of the XLT and coming up with a STX that's a little bit more rugged, off-road looking. It has the running boards that are coming standard, and apparently it's going to have the same range and be slightly cheaper. So again, they're doing some great things in keeping their costs down, but it's still going to drag on the bottom line because they just don't have the volume and they can't jack the prices up, to make a ton of money off of these. So very worrisome, because any company that's continuing to lose money on a product, you have to worry about the future of the product. We'll get into speculation in a little bit. But before we do that, I want to talk about all of the stuff that they were saying about the future EV platforms, Gen 2, the universal electric vehicle, all of that stuff that we've been hearing a lot about and was talked about at that August 11th Model T moment that I just mentioned a little bit ago. It seems like they are definitely all in. They're saying like, we have some announcements. It's just around the corner for us. They didn't say announcements. They were like the new universal electric vehicle, that $30,000-ish EV truck is just around the corner for Ford. So it sounds like they're making some really good progress. And in fact, they cited that they're already testing vehicles out. So they got them, close enough to production ready that they're testing them out. They are 95% sourced for production, which what that means is that all of the parts and everything that are going to go into the vehicle, from the tires to the screws to whatever, 95% of that has been sourced. So that means they have contract signs, they know where they're getting this stuff. So that's a very positive sign, because like you sort of have to get up to be that close and ready before you shut down the current plant to retool. They're going to be building it at the Louisville assembly plant. That's where we went for that August 11th announcement. So at some point before the end of this year, supposedly going to shut that down and then start retooling for the new Ford $30,000-ish EV truck. They also mentioned that the Marshall LFP plant, which is in Michigan, it's going to be the first LFP battery plant for cars in the US. It's owned and operated by Ford. They're using some CATL technology, so they're licensing some technology to build the LFP batteries there. That should be coming online and start production later this year, with ramping up to full production next year. So it's sort of like they're putting the domino pieces in order. You got to get the batteries in production and ready to go before you can get the assembly plant. So they're working towards that very quickly, and that's some very, very exciting news for that Gen 2 platform. So other really good tidbits about the next gen platform. First of all, Jim Farley emphasizes like he thinks that the market that we see now for EVs in Q4 2025 will be quite a bit different than what we see 2027 beyond. He actually said 2027 to 2035, and he thinks the overall market is shifting toward lower cost EVs. We're seeing, like a lot of excitement about the Nissan Leaf, a lot of excitement about the Chevy Bolt coming back at still under a $30,000 price tag. A lot of people are very excited by the Slate truck, EV truck. So there does seem to be a lot of push toward these lower cost EVs. And Ford says Jim Farley is like, we're going to be very well positioned for 2027 to 2035, where we have a lower cost EV platform, starting with that EV truck. And I say starting, and it was sort of interesting because he mentioned something about like with the universal EV platform, they focused on, first of all, making it very, very low cost. So that's where, we're hopefully getting this $30,000 price tag and that they stick to it, but also that it would be able to have multiple top hats being assembled in one facility. And if you don't know what a top hat means in the auto industry, it basically means like you could have potentially like an EV truck also being assembled in the same plant with an SUV. So supposedly this new universal EV platform is very, very versatile, and they talked about that a lot at the August 11th announcement. But they were very specific in saying the first one coming from the Louisville plant will be an EV truck. And we tried to probe and ask questions of like, will you have an SUV? Will you do like a Mach-E derivative or something like that, the next gen Mach-E? They were like, absolutely no answer on any of that speculation, but saying that you can have multiple top hats in the same facility gives me hope that we won't just see an EV truck. We'll see maybe an SUV. Who knows what's going to happen with the Mach-E? We'll get into the speculation coming up pretty soon. Not mentioned in the earnings call yesterday, but stuff that we've heard since the August 11th announcement until now is a little tidbits about this 2027 electric truck. We already knew that it was supposedly going to be roomier than a RAV4 in the interior. We've sort of figured out a few details about it. It's going to have like a decent sized truck bed. It's going to be fully featured as far as like infotainment and integration. It's going to have a lot of really great features, but we keep hearing like this, like it's not going to look like any EV truck that you've ever seen before. At that August 11th meeting, we were invited into a roundtable, and it was sort of emphasizing that it was like they've done some really neat things by including aerodynamic specialists from the very beginning of the project. So I expect it to look quite interesting. It sort of sounds like and I think I even heard that it was like the silhouette of this truck is not going to look like any other truck we've seen. So whatever that means, sounds like it's going to be pretty different, and I'm excited to hopefully see that. The other thing that I do want to mention is like there was some speculation that it's going to have a very small battery, like a 51 kilowatt hour battery. I heard nothing of the sort official. Talking to the Ford engineers in Louisville, never heard anything about battery size. They just said it would be smaller than like what you would expect, and that's due to efficiencies and improved aero. So I think they were talking about like 2/3 size, which I'm thinking they were sort of comparing it to like a Mach-E size battery, so which is 99 kilowatt hours, 91 usable. But if you say 2/3 of that, you're talking about like a 66 kilowatt hour battery, which I think is fairly reasonable. And then if you get like 250 miles of range out of that, all of a sudden you're like, that's actually pretty decent for a truck that's going to be, something that was mentioned yesterday, commuter style vehicle that you can use around town and do whatever, which is another thing that some people may be concerned with, and I am a little bit, is like, we love taking road trips in our Mustang Mach-E, but it seems Ford is like sort of going like, we're going to focus on not around town, but just like commuter vehicles and things like that, and sort of seeding the fact that EV road trips are still a big concern for a large portion of the population. We've done thousands of miles of road trips in our Mach-E, so I think they should just push for that and push for, decent range, better availability of EV charging, and just sort of go with it. But it sounds like they're going like, you know what, we're going to go with $30,000-ish vehicles and make them commuter. I'm thinking 250 miles of range. That's just my guess. I may be completely wrong, but that's just me. So I'm sort of curious as well. Like, what do you guys think? Drop a comment down below of like, what would be the minimum range that you'd want to see out of this EV truck that's coming out in 2027? Are you still like, it has to be 300? Are you like, it has to be 400? Or would you be okay with a $30,000 EV truck with 250 miles of range? Just drop a comment and let's start a discussion. With every earnings call, they always finish it with like a Q&A session. So some of this information came from the questions that analysts were asking. There was one analyst that was asking about like, what do you think about, or what should analysts think about Model E losses going forward. And, you know, they were just talking about like, you know, we're focused on Gen 2, all that other stuff. But there was one thing that I thought was very interesting, and it actually even got a little bit cut off because the moderator talked over Jim Farley. But he said, we'll be excited to give you an update after the fourth quarter as we look into next year. Very big decision for the company. And that's the part that sort of got jumbled because the moderator talked over him. So I listened to that a couple of times. A very big decision for the company. So now we'll jump into the speculation, because now it's like, what are they going to talk about after Q4? You know, my initial hope, and you know, as I was listening to it, I was like, oh, hopefully this is when we'll maybe get the announcement of the 2027 Ford EV truck and get some details, maybe a photo, some potential specs, or just some basic details about it. So I was like, maybe that's what's coming. But that line, very big decision for the company, that sort of also worries me a bit. So because they talked about the new universal EV platform a lot, I'm sort of optimistic that that's going to be good news coming out of that. Maybe that's what he was talking about, is like early next year we'll hear something about that. My guess is like we're probably not going to hear any full reveal of that 2027 truck until maybe May, maybe even later in the summer. And that's based off of like looking at what they did with the Mach-E and with the Lightning, and what they did as far as like revealing the product to when it was actually available. In both of those, it was just over a year between like the reveal and when it was available. The Mach-E, it was a little bit over a year, but we had COVID. The Lightning, it was basically a year to the date almost. So that's, and this is sort of like my guess and speculation, is like if they shut down the Louisville plant at the end of this year, it takes about a year to retool a plant. Hopefully this is a huge retooling and a completely different manufacturing process. So that would put them at the end of 2026. They're going to have the batteries ready by then, so they could start basically production early 2027. And it takes a while to ramp things up, do production validation, and then maybe go on sale in like May of 2027. So that's sort of like me and my guess. And I'm not an auto expert, not a financial expert. You're just listening to me for no reason. So that's sort of what, like, I was like, okay, maybe that's what we'll hear from that. But then I got worried for a second, because I'm like, big decision. So big decision worried me that like, is there going to be something that happens to Mustang Mach-E or the F-150 Lightning? There's things that give me hope about both of those platforms, at least for 2026. First of all, the Mustang Mach-E, they just came up with a California Special Edition or package that you can get on the Mustang Mach-E GT. We just did a video on that because that was just announced a few days ago. They just opened the order banks for the 2026 Mustang Mach-E. So, okay, I feel pretty good about the Mach-E for next year. So I don't think it's about that. The Lightning, there's concerning stuff with the Lightning, but also some good news. So they mentioned, again, that aluminum plant fire is affecting production of the F-150, which includes the Lightning. So right now, the Lightning manufacturing is paused. And part of that was because they made so many for the end of Q3, and then now Q4, they expect demand to drop. So I think it was going to be a temporary pause. But then with the aluminum plant fire, basically, as they're like struggling to get enough aluminum to make F-150s, Ford is making the decision is like, whatever aluminum that we can get to make F-150s is going to go to the gas and the hybrid F-150, because those are our money makers, and the Lightning plant will remain paused. And they didn't say like for how long. They said indefinitely, but that's just basically, I think they just need to get things sorted out. Whether that takes a month or 2 months or 3 months, who knows? They weren't saying. I'm not going to speculate, but that worried me a little bit about the F-150 Lightning, if that's an extended shutdown. But on the bright side, Ford also announced that that STX F-150 Lightning is coming out in 2026. So that gives me, again, just like with the Mach-E, it gives me hope that like everything is going to get back on track, and they'll have a new, instead of XLT, they'll have a new base trim, the STX, not including Ford Lightning Pro, F-150 Lightning Pro. So that gives me some hope. So I think that's, both of those, I was like, okay, I was worried about those. I think they may be okay. So then what else is left that could be worrisome? E-Transit, who knows what's going to happen with that? We just saw GM is going to discontinue the bright drop. So I was like, oh, it could be that, but that doesn't sound like a big decision for the company. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's not that. The one that I'm worried about, and you guys tell me if I'm like completely off base or if you're worried about it as well, is the T3. Trust the truck, the truck that's supposedly going to be the next gen F-150 Lightning. No official name. T3 is just sort of like their code name, and it's going to be built at Blue Oval City in Tennessee, the biggest, just gigantic plant that they're building in West Tennessee that also includes a battery plant in conjunction with SK. So they were supposed to be in production, I believe, or by the end of 2025. They pushed that back. They keep pushing it back, and now they're the latest that I heard is like production was going to start in 2028. So that's a very big delay, and it worries me with the other comments that Jim Farley said about focusing on low-cost commuter type vehicles. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a T3. So does that mean it's canceled? I don't know. Does that mean it's going to be delayed again? I don't know. Does that mean that very big decision for the company, that it's undecided? I don't know. That's where I ended up settling on. There's nothing official from Ford, of course. This is 100% me just speculating, but I'm curious what you guys think. What do you think is going to happen with T3? And would you be disappointed, or would you be like, yeah, I sort of get it? Do you think there is a future of large EV trucks in the US? And I'm saying in the near term, because like maybe 20 years from now, yeah, we'll be like, ha ha ha, they didn't think EV trucks were successful. But I'm talking about the next couple of years. Like we saw that the F-150 Lightning was the #1 EV truck in the US in Q3, and I think it sold like just over 10,000. Rivian, the Cybertruck, none of them are actually doing that well in terms of sales numbers when you consider like Ford sells 1 million F-150s, and we're talking about 10,000 in a quarter for the F-150 Lightning. None of the trucks are doing well. The Cybertruck has not officially flopped, but it's looking more and more that way. Like the sales just are not great with the Cybertruck. I actually just checked because somebody was asking me about local inventory of Tesla, and I looked, and there's I think 90 some Cybertrucks available right now in the San Diego area that I could literally just go and buy one because it's in their current inventory. So there's a lot of inventory out there of Cybertrucks, but it's across the board. Like Rivian is, I think they're emphasizing, and most people are excited to have the R1S, but people are really excited for the R2 that should be coming relatively soon. We're starting to see some of the test vehicles out there. So it's not a truck. So is this potentially the death of T3, or do you think this big decision is something else? I'm actually seriously asking your question. It isn't one of those prompts where I'm like, I know the answer and I want you just to comment to improve the algorithm. I'm really curious. What do you guys think Ford is going to decide next year? But also with their entire EV lineup, what do you see as the future of the Mustang Mach-E, the F-150 Lightning, 2026 and beyond? I would love to see a Gen 2 Mustang Mach-E on the universal EV platform. Maybe if they can, build something like very high performance out of it, that would be very exciting. If not, hopefully it'll get its own platform. By the way, and this also goes back into the discussion, numerous times Jim Farley has said over the past year, 2 years, that Ford is going to focus on making their iconic work vehicles, the trucks and the delivery vans and those type of things. They have a strength in that. Ford Pro is just making them tons and tons of money. But also passion vehicles, which is the Mustang, which is why they have like a Mustang GTD now, which seems excessive and just way out there, but it's a passion vehicle. But the same thing with the Bronco line. It's like, it's not necessarily as practical as a lot of other SUVs out there, but people absolutely love it and it's doing very well. And the same thing with the Raptor series, and they don't have some of those restraints with the EPA restrictions and regulations. So they're sort of like, seem to be very happy to go full bore in those passion vehicles. I'm hoping that they classify the Mustang Mach-E as a passion vehicle albeit electric, and that they really want to continue that and come out with a fantastic model for Gen 2 that really like sets the bar for performance for an electric, mid-size crossover SUV. Completely sort of unrelated, I know that there's been also some speculation that there may be a four-door Mustang at some point. I was like, just me being me, is like, wouldn't it sort of be cool to have like a four-door Mustang that's electric? And I, when I say that, I'm thinking like a Mustang Mach-E look, but on a Taycan or Model S or Audi e-tron GT. So not an SUV, down lower, and of course if you made it into a shooting brake, that would be even better. But what would you guys think about that? Like a four-door Mustang Mach-E that's more of Taycan like. I don't know if they'll do that because the SUV segment is so popular. Ford has basically said, their car that they sell will be the Mustang and everything else will be SUV or truck. But I could see that coming back. I don't know. Anyways, thank you for sticking along for this whole video where I did a lot of speculation. I want to hear your speculation. Thank you to our YouTube subscribers. We just hit 20,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. That means so much to us. We couldn't have gotten here without you, obviously. But also thank you to our Patreon members who have supported us from the beginning. We have some people that have been supporting us for 5 years. That's just amazing to see that you guys are willing to contribute monthly to help fund all of the stuff that goes into making this channel, as well as our YouTube members. We're starting to do more stuff with our YouTube membership, providing behind the scenes photos and videos and those type of things and posts. So we're doing that on Patreon and YouTube membership. So check the description if you want to join those, starting at just $2 a month. But we appreciate all of you. And if you do the $6 a month Unbridled on Patreon, we occasionally send out some stuff, and Liv's been assembling some more goodie bags or goodie things to send out. So stay tuned for that. But again, if you've watched this whole video, thank you for sticking with us. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to go over and say hello to go over and say hello to Liv as she's working her day job. And she would probably yell over here and go, just remember, whatever you drive, whether it's a Ford EV or a Ford Bronco or whatever, enjoy the ride.